Your goal while watching this video is to learn how to find the circumference of any circle and the area of any circle. Quick refresher on a few terms we use when we're talking about circles. The diameter is the distance across the circle, and it must go through the center. And then the radius is half of the diameter. So the radius goes from an outer edge of the circle to the center of the circle. Radius will always be half of the diameter, and I like to remember that diameter is a longer word, so it's a longer measurement, and radius is a shorter word, so it is the shorter measurement. And again, if you want this for your notes, radius is half of the diameter. And then lastly, you're going to hear the word circumference a lot. Circumference is the distance around the outside of a circle. It's kind of like perimeter on polygons, but when we're dealing with circles, we call that distance around the outside circumference. All right, on any circle, we talked about this on Pi Day a little bit, but for any circle in the entire world, the diameter of the circle, so if I was to draw the diameter of this frisbee, which would be 10 inches, the diameter of the circle will always go around the outside of the circle, or the circumference of the circle, a tiny bit more than 3 times. So you'll need a little bit more than 3 diameters to equal the circumference of the circle. And it's been figured out that how many of those diameters you need is pi. So you need pi diameters, a little bit more than 3, 3.1415, 926, etc. That many diameters will always equal the circumference of the circle. So to calculate circumference then, we take the diameter and we multiply it by a little more than 3. We multiply it by pi. Pi is a little bit more than 3. So to find the circumference of this frisbee, I would substitute in what I know. I don't know the circumference, I'm trying to find that. I know that pi is approximately 3 1400. Sometimes for pi, if we're dealing with fractions, we can use 22/7 because that is also approximately the value of pi. And then I need to multiply that by the diameter. So my diameter is 10. Now I can calculate that out. The circumference of this frisbee, or the distance around the outside of this frisbee, I'm multiplying by a factor of 10, so I move my decimal over one place, and it's about 31 4/10 of an inch. And remember, this is really the approximate circumference. It's not exact because pi is not exactly 3.14. Pi is approximately 3.14, so the circumference is approximately 31.4 inches. If I had a string that was 31 4/10 of an inch long, it would go around the outside of the circle almost exactly. In part B, find the circumference. So again, I have my circumference formula. I'm filling in what I know. I don't know the circumference. That's what I'm trying to find. I know that pi is approximately 3.14, or 22/7. And I know the diameter of this watch face is 28 millimeters. So to find the circumference, I know that that 28 millimeter diameter will go around the outside of the circle approximately 3 times, a little bit more than 3 times. So I'm going to take that 28 times my number that's a little more than 3, which is pi. When I multiply that out, I'm not going to do it exactly right now, but it should be pretty close to 90 millimeters. And so that's just telling me that if I wanted to take a string or measuring tape around the outside of this watch, I would need one that's about 90 millimeters long. What I'm going to have you do next, and you might need to pause here, so before I go on in the video, you have time to do this. You are going to do one problem about circumference, and the letter of your first name will tell you which problem you're going to do. So if your first name starts with one of these letters, you are going to do number 3 only. If your first name starts with one of these letters, you'll do number 4. Make sure you have that on a piece of paper that you can turn in. I'm going to check that answer before I give you the practice work that goes with this. Pause the video. If you need more time, I'm going to go on. All right, we can use our knowledge of circumference and we can use it to find the distance around a semicircle. So a semicircle, this particular semicircle is half of a full circle. If we wanted to find the perimeter of the semicircular region, that would be the distance around the outside of the semicircle. So what we're going to do is we're going to use our circumference formula, which still talks about the distance around something. Circumference is a little more than 3 diameters. And we're going to just calculate the circumference of a full circle to start. So if I would calculate the circumference of a full circle, I know that pi is approximately 3.14, and my diameter is 6. So I'm going to do 3.14 times 6. I have 2 decimal places in my factor, so I'll put 2 decimal places in my product. So the circumference that I get is 18 84 meters. However, that is telling me this distance. So if I want to find the distance that's just around half of that, I want only half of this. So I'm going to take that and cut it in half. So divide that by 2. If I take 18 84 and I divide it by 2, I'm going to pull up my calculator and do this fast. I get 9 42 meters. Now, stop and think. Remember that that is the distance that's highlighted up here. When we're finding the perimeter of the whole semicircular region, we need to include this. So we're then going to go back and add on this side, this 6 meters. And then we can get our full perimeter of 15 42 meters. If you have questions on this, now would be a good time to pause your video and ask for clarification. If not, we're going to move on. The other calculation that you need to, as a 7th grader, be really familiar with finding is the area of a circle. Not too worried about that formula yet, but remember when we're finding area of something, even if it's a circle, which seems kind of counterintuitive, we are calculating how many squares cover the surface of that shape. So to find the area of this circle, you could be really tedious and count all these squares and count these partial squares and say, okay, that one and that would make a full square. But we can't be precise that way, and it always ends up being a bit of an approximation. So to calculate exactly how many square units cover the area of a circle, we are going to use this formula. So to find the area of any circle, you take pi times the radius squared, or pi times radius times radius. So to find the area of this circle, again, to find out how many square centimeters would cover this circle, we are going to write our formula. Area can be found by taking pi times the radius squared, or pi times radius times radius. We don't know what the area is, that's what we're trying to find. We do know that pi is approximately 3 14 or again, 22 over 7. And then my radius is 7. So I'm going to multiply by 7 squared, or if it helps you, 7 times 7. So pi times 7 times 7, it's going to give me close to 150. On your calculator or on your scratch paper, you could calculate out the exact, but approximately 150 square centimeters. And this is very important that you include that square because it's telling us that we're measuring with square units. So we take about 150 little 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter squares to cover that circle. For part B, same formula, you're finding the area. I've got my area formula. You're just substituting in what you know. We know pi is approximately 3.14. Our radius here is only half of this distance, so 13 squared, or 3.14 times 13 times 13. And then when you do those calculations, your area will be in square inches. The last thing I need you to do before you get your practice work from me is do an area problem, and you're going to use the number of letters in your first name. So if you have 5 letters in your first name, you are going to do number 2. If you have 4 letters in your first name, for example, you will do number 1. When you have this problem as well as the circumference problem from earlier done, you can bring those to me.